What's up, guys? This is Gian Varela, and tonight I'm gonna give you a look into how I produced Wataqui. So I sampled Wataqui from Martina Camargo's Canto Palo y Cuero. It's an album where she has legendary vocals from Águila, Me Robaste el Sueño, and Wataqui. And the way I sampled it was through Melody.ml. So this is the original record. I used Melody.ml to extract the vocal and the stems, although the stems were just the drums and the vocals. It's paid, but you want high quality stems. That way, when you work with the track, way easier to work with, way easier to process, and it just sounds way nicer, right? It is paid though, but it's completely worth it. I mean, here you go. There's some of the records I'm working on, and from that vocal, right into the project. When I sample records, I want the record to sound like an original record. It means that people are gonna have a hard time actually knowing if you did a record from scratch or you sampled it if they don't recognize the sample. So you gotta think about that when you're gonna think about your record and your vision for your record. In this case, I knew I was gonna use a very Latin percussion, Latin drums, and ethnic sounds to it, flutes, things like that, that would make the record feel like an original, right? So I started straight into the drums, the bass line, get the groove going. Right, so opening the project here, we start off with the drum bus, and you will notice I'm using a lot of samples. I use Loop Cloud to choose my loops and my samples. The reason why, Loop Cloud, you just add it to the project. I've got it already here. And it's just very easy to bring in samples and loops into your project. It picks the BPM for you, it gets the keys for you, and it's really easy to use. Plus, in terms of drums, I believe Loop Cloud, it's easier to find the genre you want to work with, right? You should definitely give it a try. Splice is cool and everything too. Just for this type of record, tech house records, Loop Cloud is definitely really nice quality from it. And same as when you're cooking, you want to choose amazing samples which will make your work easier in the future. If you pick really good sounding samples, you don't have to process them that much or do anything to them sometimes. You'll notice that in the drums. So, 3 different types of kicks. The drop kick is how it sounds. Fuller, it's got the click, it's got the high frequencies. I use the FF Saturn to saturate the mid and low ends of it. I use the Cashmere Essentials for the kick. I like that plugin a lot. I feel it's got some really cool features to it. You should try it. And I use the Simplon as a filter for cutting off the low frequencies or high frequencies when you automate it, right? Got another basic chain here. I didn't really use this one too much. And then we've got the break kick. No processing in this. It's just honestly a filter of it because I chose a really nice sounding kick off the start. And the second drop has a different kick than the first drop because it's a different kind of drop. I wanted to make a variation to it, right? You go into the drop. It's a lower kick. Once again, no processing to it. It just sounds kick, right? And in combination with the instrumental itself and everything, then you're back to the drop kick. 3 different types of kick. Why I chose it like that? Honestly, it was just experimenting. That's how it came out. You got your clap, some EQing to it. You got the top drum bus, which under it is got the shaker bus, the hi-hat bus. I like to use buses a lot just to organize my project better. Not much to that and processing. The hi-hats bus, different layers of hi-hats, different levels of them. What is it? Some artists like to hand the hi-hats, a lot of processing to it. I've done it before also, but for this project, once again, I chose the correct hi-hats. I really put my time into picking the stems and the samples, and we got this going, right? Some fills, the reverse rides, pre-dub claps, snare build, Noizu snare. Noizu's got amazing samples. And of course, once again, picking the correct samples will save you time. Some ear candy, and this is actually really important for this record, the percussion bus. I really went to town with the percussions. The reason why is because the percussion is the main groove of Latin tech house records, and especially records that if you want to take everything of the hi-hats out, you've got the groove to it, right? So Let me play you the brick bus. A lot happening. And you've got that groove pretty well marked. But when you add the kick to it, right? Second drop kick. Just even without the bass line and just the percussion and the second drop kick, it sounds fat. It's got that grittiness to it, and it's got that drive to it. And if you're noticing, there's not too much stuff happening on the project either. Sometimes simpler is way better. That's the drums bus, guys. But of course, drums is one thing. I am a big fan of playing the drum bus by itself when you want to really make sure you're not missing anything in the drums. Right? So if you feel like you gotta add something to it, you add it. If not, leave it as it is. You don't have to add something, right? That's why you hear the little snare that comes in to add variations to your record. Right into the tech house. Quick tip on drums. You really have to, once again, I know I'm talking a lot about samples, but really choose the right samples for the kind of groove and sound you want. So for this hi-hat, I'm a big fan of the hi-hat, not the hi-hat. I want the hi-hat to be almost a shaker because it makes it sound longer and it has more groove to it. For Latin tech house, it's one of my go-to hi-hat styles. Before we get into the bassline and sub chapter, quickly on the drum bus, how I process it. If you notice, I have an auto filter, an EQ8, also to EQ it if I want to. In this project, I didn't use it too much. I did use the knock plugin, the UAD SPL transient shaper, and the UAD distressor. It gives it a crunch. Just with that, the drum bus sounds as it is. For now, you cannot have a solid groove without your bass line and your sub. So let's get into the bass line and the sub immediately. I put in this project the bass line and the sub under the synth bus. Sorry for that. And inside the synth bus, I did a side bus, which is being side chained with a trigger using Shaper Box 2 and a ghost kick up here. The reason I did this, it's a tutorial I read, sorry, and I like to implement new techniques in tutorials into different projects, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, I don't use it. There's a lot of ways to sidechain, guys. I mean, this one's a bit more complex. We use the sidechain trigger to trigger the Shaper Box sidechain. And you can notice it there, right? I can see what's going on with the kick and the EQ right there. But you don't have to do that. You can use the LFO tool or the kickstart tool, whatever rocks your bus. Now, bass and sub, I separate them. The reason why is because I use my sub in mono, as you can notice here with the utility I put on it, but I do my bass wider. It just gives it a thicker feeling, and I hear in a club, in a car, in the bass lines that I work with, more power to it, right? So, got two subs here, drop bass and the drop sub, and the break sub. In the drop sub, very simple. I used Ableton's go-to basic sub sign, added a bit of release to it, tiny bit of distortion, but saturator, I got the Camel Crusher there just to play around with it, EQ'd it, and this is how it sounds. It's got a very nice groove to it. I want to open the MIDI because it's important. Sometimes we hear records and we think they're so hard to produce or the subs are so complicated, but they're not. This is a 3-note sub. The difference is that if you hear it, it sounds like it's going ba 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 ba, but it's going actually ba ba ba. It's just, you gotta really put your ear into it and try to figure out what melody and what vibe you want with your sub, so you get that driving feeling, right? So with this one, but it's 3 notes. So don't be intimidated by sublines and basses. Just play around with them. This is the reason why I use a Novation Launchpad, because with this you really get to play with stuff and just vibe with it. It's very different than MIDIing everything with your keyboard. Here you just get to play with it and vibe with it. And I think Latin Tech House, you need that groove going. Break sub is quite simple. It's just one line, same thing, basic sub sign, more release on it, straight to it. I'm using the Camel Crusher here and the saturator much stronger also. There's sometimes, and then in sub bus, I do process it harder, but for this one, we'll talk about the mixing part later. Keep in mind, I do mix as I produce the record, it's really important that you get a clean record, EQ stuff, and make sure you try to get it as best as possible to the end goal. But I'll talk about mixing and mastering later. Now you've got the bass bus. Now the bass bus, that's where I'm putting in a bit more effort into it, right? So the drop bass high, if you notice, same bass, basic subsine, saturator, but I'm grabbing a specific frequency of it and I'm magnifying it through the FF Saturn, right? Notice here I've got the band 2 level really up. It might look crazy, but to me it sounds better. Let me play it for you. So this signal in the bass line is key to me. It's not the same without it. You gotta A/B it. And once I process the bass line that sits on top of the sub bass, I widen it with Infected Mushrooms wider. I like this one for bass lines. I mean, I've used a lot of the other ones. I just like this one. It's my go-to. You can use whatever you want. And when you hear the sub bass and the bass bus together, there's this thickness to it. If I take off the bass bus, it's different. It's not that strong. With the bass bus on, sounds fuller and it's not clashing. And when you get this with the kick, you've got a groove going on, right? Let me play the kick now with the bass line. Let's put a second drop kick. I love this second drop. You've got the groove there. This will rock any dance floor in the world. So let me take off this and go back down to the bass bus. And in the bass bus, I've got certain other things, a sample bass stab. This does have a bit more processing too. Let's hear it out. That's all it is, just a wub. A basic chain I have, I put an empty club reverb on it. It's a default Ableton reverb, but they really like it. I like this OTT preset called Pincher Low. I use a lot of presets for this stuff just to work quicker, right? And then I dive into the presets and really like see what I gotta do. Some EQing and some utility, but not much going on either. Got some bass fills that also fill up. Once again, just these are samples from Cloud. Also a nice wub. Now, what makes this really cool is, of course, the EQ it's got. You check out the EQ there and the automation I've got on it. There's a lot of automation going on with this one. Because that's what gives you the dynamics to your bass wubs and stuff like that. If you want to use it with samples, you know, wow. Same as you use your mouth to wow. Filter, sound, I'm doing the same thing here. You give it a play, right? See, you got some cool automation here. And that's what's up with the bass bus. You got the groove going. Quick tip on the bass line and the groove before we get into the vocals, but in the percussion bus I use Track Spacer, sidechain the kick also. Track Spacer is a great plugin you want to use. It just sidechains the signal and ducks the incoming frequency of the sidechain input you choose to the track you put it on. It's great for mixing. You really want to use it. There's a tip. And now into vocals. Gonna give you some little cool tips about vocals. I froze the second main vocal track here just to really free up CPU in my computer. For some reason, this one was giving me a bit of trouble. Thank you, Lawrence, for this tip, because if I didn't do this, I would not be able to record this. Shout out to Lawrence for this. If you notice, the second vocal, the wet vocal in a way, right? It's got a bit of a stronger processing, a little radiator, RVox stereo, little micro shift, and endless mouth for the effects. Now for the main Vox, first plugin you want to use when you use melody.ml or you extract stems, Clarity. This plugin is a game changer. It just clears and cleans all the noise you don't want in the background to your vocals, right? Let me give a little show here. Without. You hear a bit of that dirtiness. And it starts cleaning it up nicer in the background. And I mean, if you do too much, it'll mess it up. But if you're recording it with your microphone in your house or an apartment or a place where it has some weird noise to it, this plugin will clean up the track. I also added it through a basic chain, some low cuts, some high cut cues, and reduced the ambience. Another stock Ableton plugin, default, whatever you want to call it. This is a filter I'm using for any moment here. just to clean up dirtiness below it more. OTT, and then the EQ8. If you notice, I'm using already a pre-made setup, EDM Vocal 1. That's something I actually do a lot also. If you notice, I have a full-on a whole line of chains and buses and racks here. It makes your job easier. If you like how it sounded in the past track, use it again, tweak it. It makes everything faster. Organize your projects like that, and organize before you produce. That's a cool tip also. I use the serum here for some effects, distortion, chorus, delay, reverb on the vocal, and sometimes I use a sausage fatter on it. I took it off for this one because it was already pretty dirty, but with this I've got the vocal sounding nice. Wataqui, everything else is pretty, it's pretty basic. You've got a second layer that's a bit wetter. Now this is something I definitely wanted to show you guys. But the way I did the vocal in the build-up sampler, and I grabbed the sample and the vocal of the sample, and I made it into MIDI note that just plays everything. Sorry. Right? You go. And it's got a nice vibe to it, how it's working, and it goes out. And the endless smile also gives me that, automated, endless smile for some reverb. You've got your buses on the main one also, or the wet one, sorry. Echo Boy, little micro shift, those are my sends. And that's it for the vocal, you hear it out. It sounds clean. It sounds nice. And it's vibing. That's the vocals. Alright, so for the flutes, the leads of the record, right? This is the part where I really wanted to have an ethnic feel to it, because Wataqui, coming from Colombia, it had that jungle vibe to it, and I felt like it gelled so well with the vocal. It's very traditional to use flutes and things like that with Latin American vocals. So I froze and flattened the MIDIs I use for these flutes. So now the flutes they're not MIDI as you see, but I'll show you the secret on how I was able to get those flutes. And it's called Contact, but it's not what you think. There's no pack that says Latin American flutes. These are actually East Asia flutes, right? Specifically the shakuhachi. This is what got me all the flute sounds. I'll play it to you here with the... You notice that, right? You notice that. That's the sound. That's it. I grabbed that, pitched it down with Complex Pro in Ableton, and you get the flute hit, right? But shakuhachi got everything. You've got all the flutes there in the record. And that's how we get the drop main flute here, which will also speak about the automation on it, sorry. See? That's one of these flutes in here. I don't know which one it is specifically, but you get that flute from here, and after a good amount of processing, right? The flute without the processing, let me show it to you. It's not that strong. Definitely want that processing. There you go. But with the processing, Mumbai Power OTT. Yeah, I love this OTT preset. I use it a lot. I mean, check it out if you want to copy it. It makes it fat. Right. And from the contact flutes, I really made everything here. You've got the drop main flute, the longer flute, this one. All of these are from the contact shakuhachi. You've got some samples that I did use also from Loop Cloud, just to give it a little twist. I was looking for some stuff playing around and I found this one. I liked it. It made sense. And when you play the entire record with the flutes, little bass line coming in. Again, all the flutes are from Contact. And that's how we made all the flutes and the ethnic sounds of the record. There's some ambience going on. I'll just show it to you guys. There's not much happening. Some strings. The one atmosphere, that I really thought about a lot was the intro one. It was quite easy too.
Wataqui, Wataqui.
I just grabbed a vocal that goes from Loop Cloud, pitched it up, processed it, but I added thermal. This plugin really is a game changer for pads, for strings, for atmosphere stuff, and it's so cool. It looks awesome too. All the stuff that Output does is like at another level. I love them. And that's it with the leads and the atmosphere. Before we get into mix and mastering and closing the session, I did want to also give you a tip on automating your flutes and your leads, just so they have more movement when you're listening it on speakers and on headphones, right? I'm gonna show you a bit about what I'm talking about. Check this flute out and check how I automatize, whatever you want to say with it, the flute. So it has movement. When you automate the panning, you really give movement to your sounds. It's a detail that's really important. And to me, it can be mixing, but at the same time, it's part of the production process of it. So I'm just gonna show you my master. Here you go. That's what it is. And I've got the linear NB and the L2 limiter, and that's it. Call it a day with the mastering. Now, the reason why, it's because I don't do my mixing and mastering. I prefer to work with a mixing and mastering engineer who has years and years of experience over my experience, and we can A and B the strategy of the mix. I do believe that you need to know how to mix your records to a certain degree. You need to know what's going on, and you want to make sure that you do what I would call the production mixing and not the engineer mixing, right? At least, so in the production mixing, you've got a clean sound, a fat sound, and you're not gonna have the mixing engineer guess what you want, right? It's gonna be easy to communicate with him. You'll give him an easy job, and with his experience, he's gonna make your record sound thicker. A mixing engineer is not supposed to fix the production of your record. He's supposed to augment it. He's supposed to make it stronger. So if it sounds awesome to you, when you use a mixing engineer, it's gonna sound even better. Every time I work with my mixing engineer, he's called Elvinho Circilio, Brazilian. Brazilians know about bass a lot, and credits to him, man. I send him a great sounding record from my taste, and he delivers me an even better sounding record, but both are playable in the club. Of course, the mixed and mastered record sounds way doper. He's got some awesome analog equipment too that I like what he uses for his sound. Once again, it all depends on who you're working with and what you want to do with your record. And that's it, guys. That's what I did to produce Wataqui. I hope any of the information I gave you today will help you out in the future. And if you do like these videos and these production videos, let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment, share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Gian Varela out.